The Romney campaign is not conceding Ohio. Pardon me, that is my mistake. The Romney campaign is not conceding Ohio. Kelly O'Donnell from NBC News is reporting that the Romney campaign state director in Ohio has informed us that they do not believe that Ohio is decided. Again, NBC News has projected that the winner in Ohio is President Obama, and that was what put him over the top to victory tonight. But the Romney campaign so far says not so fast. We'll see what we can do to get somebody from the Romney campaign to explain that to us. In terms of the Republican echo chamber on this, they're deciding that this is not over. So what we're looking at here in Chicago is Obama campaign headquarters that believes it is over. I'll tell you that NBC News projects that it is over, but that is not the same truth on the other side of the aisle.
Yeah, and other media organizations are calling it. Look, this is a difficult moment for any political campaign. People have worked their hearts out. I think any campaign has a right to sit there to let the votes be counted on. I think it's not unusual for this to have to sink in a little bit more, but the writing is clearly on the wall. The president's been reelected, and they'll concede in due time here, I think, over the next hour or so.
All of the networks at this point have called the state of Ohio, which of course would be decisive. So all of the networks have called it. The Romney campaign is saying that they don't accept those calls, but we will see. If it's relevant to you, the Secretary of State in Ohio is the top elections official in that state. It's John Husted. He's a former Republican leader in the legislature there, and he's been at the middle of a number of very, very partisan and hard-fought battles over access to the polls in Ohio for this election.
Steve, is it your feeling that you ran a presidential campaign against what has turned out to be the best presidential campaign team that we have seen in recent memory? This Team Obama, what they did 4 years ago coming from nowhere, and what they've done again tonight against this daunting re-election task of getting reelected with that unemployment rate up where
Look, it's a great team, and I think what they accomplished in the Democratic primary 4 years ago, they came into a general election against Senator McCain. It was the worst Republican environment, I think, in modern history. 2008 wasn't a great year for Republicans, but this was one of the most challenging environments for an incumbent president ever.
Yes,
and they have won the race decisively.
They showed they could do it both ways. They could do it on the open seat as the challenger, and then do it again in this environment.
With the Romney campaign not conceding Ohio, even as all the networks have called the state for Ohio, we're going to go now to Kelly O'Donnell from NBC News with the latest on the Romney campaign's thinking here and what's going on with this result in Ohio. Kelly?
Good evening, Rachel. Well, what we've been told is the people who are on the ground, who have been looking particularly at the results in a place like Hamilton County around Cincinnati, believe that, according to the Romney team, it is not over yet. So while they know the celebration is happening in Chicago and ultimately the president may be reelected, when it comes to Ohio, at this hour, on this night in Ohio, they are not yet ready to say that Romney's chances in this state are over. This may just be a short-term issue. It may be an issue that when all the votes are counted, then we will have a resolution. But for now, and they believe it's important that for now, they do not concede Ohio. So what they've been looking at are ways where they believe Romney has outperformed John McCain from 4 years ago, or perhaps matched what President Bush had in 2004. They're looking at those kinds of models. Chuck Todd has been crunching our numbers. He sees the plan differently, as do the teams of people who've been working those numbers on behalf of NBC and the other networks. But I'm simply passing on to you that the Romney campaign is saying Ohio is not yet over, at least from their look at the books.
Kelly,
Rachel?
are you hearing, do we have any information from the state, rather than just from the campaign, that would indicate whether or not the Romney's complaints here or their reticence to go along with the network calls here is well-founded?
Well, we don't have the final tallies yet. There are still outstanding counties, and in some cases they are, of course, in areas where the GOP believes they have strong precincts. So this, earlier tonight, in talking to the state attorney general, and we've talked to the Secretary of State, they had said it would likely be a late night to get all the data. The projections, of course, have worked on long models that usually hold up on nights like this. We've seen it before where campaigns are not yet ready to let go. In this case, they believe they have assets on the ground telling them a different story. So at least for the moment, it may be a pause, but the Romney team believes Ohio is not beyond its reach at this point.
Kelly O'Donnell, thank you very much for that. I have a feeling this won't be the last time we speak on this matter. I really appreciate your help with this. In terms of what we know from Ohio, in terms of the state, this is important. Media have been in Columbus at the atrium of the Ohio State House, there to obviously report on the returns in Ohio. The Secretary of State, John Husted, came out and addressed the media and said, we're told from somebody who's there, he could not comment on what has been reported in terms of the calls by the various networks of President Obama winning the state, but he acknowledged that if you look at the trends of still outstanding ballots in the state, you can probably come to a pretty good conclusion. Secretary of State John Husted, Republican Secretary of State John Husted, then said he would not be at the podium again tonight. So in terms of the Secretary of State, in terms of them counting the ballot, he did not say it's done, but he said if you look at what's remaining, you can come to your own conclusions, and then he left saying he wouldn't be back.
Well, he gave commentary, gave no official word, and left himself an out. He left the barn door wide open for him to get out somehow. And that's it was probably some consultation between him and the Romney camp. It wouldn't surprise me. But look, I think that, you know, this has got to be a real tough moment because there was so much energy put into defeating President Obama. And they really thought they had it. I mean, the discussions we had earlier today, both camps were very confident they were going to win this thing. Somebody was going to be disappointed, and tonight it's the Romney camp.
And that's an important point because it wasn't faux confidence. They weren't acting. The Romney campaign believed with strong conviction that he was going to be elected the 45th president of the United States tonight. And if you look at the information flow to Republicans in the country, conservatives in the country, Republicans in this country believed heading into today that Mitt Romney was going to be elected as president of the United States. So there's shock now, there's disappointment seeping in, and it'll take a little bit of time, I think, for the campaign to get around. I
have two Senate calls that I want to make sure that I get in. First, in Arizona. In Arizona, the race is between Richard Carmona, the Democratic former Surgeon General, and Jeff Flake, Republican congressman. NBC now projects that Jeff Flake, the Republican candidate for Senate in Arizona, has defeated Richard Carmona. We've also got another Senate call in New Mexico. In New Mexico, this is the former Democratic Senator Jeff Bingaman's seat. It will be held by Martin Heinrich. Martin Heinrich, the Democrat, defeating Heather Wilson in New Mexico. So one call in Arizona for the Republican Senate candidate, one call in New Mexico for the Democratic Senate candidate. What this means with that addition of Martin Heinrich to the Democrats' tally in the Senate is that even without Vice President Biden, the Democrats retain control of the United States Senate as the House goes to the Republican Party.
I think it's another example of where you see the issues, as you pointed out well a few moments ago, were what decides these elections, the policy differences. And these Senate candidates ran on those policies supporting the president. And the fact that they've all done so well, and again, a difficult time for Democrats to run for office where you have almost 8% unemployment and a lot more unemployment. And they were given these victories. And again, with all this terrible ethnic stuff being thrown around by people. By the way, Donald Trump is tonight calling for revolution. Revolution. Again, this strange dispensation that people on the right are given in this country. Don't we still have a Patriot Act or something like that? Or
it would be
an Alien and Sedition Act?
If he was just a kook, but he was a central part of the Romney campaign.
He was doing robocalls to the end. The candidate of the Republican Party went out and literally genuflected to him in Las Vegas. He was a big part of the team. And the presidential candidate never stood for it and said, enough, Donald. This isn't what we do in this country. And I think it's a shame on their part that they did it that way.
I want to note, and I don't mean to cross-advertise here, but on the conservative cable news network, Fox News Channel, Fox News Channel called Ohio for President Obama, but the on-air talent at Fox News Channel is refusing to concede that they believe it. Karl Rove is describing this as being just like 2000, and it is not over.
I should find that word talent for the people who aren't in this industry.
Oh, I should mention,
meaning they happen to have positions.
The people who are
say anything about their
people
quality.
who are wearing wearing makeup and who are having cameras pointed at them. It's not everybody on Fox News Channel tonight, but some of the people who Fox is putting on tonight are refusing to believe their own network's call in the state of Ohio. I want to bring Chuck Todd in here. Chuck, first ask you about what you make of the Romney campaign refusing to concede Ohio, and what that means if this is going to become something that is a contested call.
Well, one thing I want to do is explain why our folks are fairly confident in the Ohio call, and that has to do with what we have here. This is Cuyahoga County. That's all I'm looking at here. As you can see, the president, there's only about, let me add up the votes here, 384, so a little over 400,000. Total vote is reported in Cuyahoga now, but I want to show you how much total vote actually is. This is what it was in 2008. As you can see, there's over 100,000, if not 150,000 votes left just to come in Cuyahoga County, and that is what gave our folks, among some other things having to do with what else is left in other places, the comfort level in calling Ohio. But let's not forget a few other things that are going on here. See all of the gray areas here? I can pull them up very quickly. As you can see, the president's lead is holding fairly strong here in Colorado. We can go back here. He's leading in Nevada. He's leading in Virginia now. Actually, he's pulled ahead in Virginia, which we hadn't had in a while. Let me show you the Northern Virginia numbers that come in. And it's very narrow, but he is 22,000 votes separate him. But right now we are talking extraneous numbers that are left at this point, and the president leads in Florida. So the point is, okay, let's say there's something wacky in Cuyahoga, and the Cuyahoga numbers don't go the way the way our assumptions go. There's Colorado, Nevada, Florida, Virginia that are all ever so slightly appear to be trending toward the president. You'd rather be, with this few precincts remaining to be counted, you'd rather be the president than Mitt Romney in Florida. You'd rather be the president than Mitt Romney in Virginia. Ditto with Colorado and ditto with Nevada.
This is kind of amazing. I will say that the politics of this, not just the counting of this, sort of can't go unremarked upon. I mean, what's happening on the right is that one of the on-air contributors at the Fox News Channel is one of the single largest outside spenders in this race in favor of Mitt Romney, who is Karl Rove, who is now trying to get on air the Fox News Channel to rescind its call in Ohio in favor of the candidate that he has bankrolled to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. This is a remarkable
this
thing.
Goes to the larger point that I'd been making quite a bit, which is that there was going to be a big chunk, I heard Steve talk about this, a big chunk of one of the two sides that was not going to believe they lost. There's more than just feeling aggrieved that they lost. They don't believe it. And I think you're going to have a large chunk of the Republican base that they're not going to understand it. They've been told that the polls were skewed for weeks, that there was something wrong with the polling, and that there's something wrong here. And so that just makes it more difficult to govern. Let's not pretend that it doesn't. And it's going to be interesting to watch the Republican Party. You're going to have guys like Bob Corker, Lindsey Graham, Haley Barbour, sort of the establishment wing of the party, trying to focus the party, going, hey guys, stop burying your head in the sand. This was a demographic shellacking that took place tonight. But there's going to be other parts of it that, there's money to be made in some parts of the conservative wing of the party to sort of spin this up.
Wow.
Chuck, can you get a projection now? Is it too early to see how the popular vote's going to go tonight, the national vote?
Well, I can tell you what our pollsters are showing. Here's the raw popular vote right now. And as you can see, Romney's got about a less than 200,000 vote lead. Our pollsters, but we have basically most of the uncounted vote is West Coast. It's California. So the president's very likely to have our pollsters, our NBC Wall Street Journal pollsters who we have in our boiler room, they project the president to have about a 1 to 1.5 percentage point popular vote victory, if you will, when all is said and done, which, by the way, our last NBC Wall Street Journal poll was 1 point. Not to say, I'm just, throwing that out there. I think look, we took everybody beat up on pollsters this year. I'm pretty proud of our poll. We worked really hard. We spent a lot of money. And our pollsters spend a lot of money and time to do quality work. And I think sometimes both on the state level and the national level, and it gets mixed up with folks that don't spend as much money.
Could he get 50%, Chuck, tonight, the president?
Oh, I don't. I mean, it doesn't look like if it's 49-49. I mean, there's always that 1%. We got to wait and see. I'm sure that's possible. If it's 1.5, then yeah, he should get the 50%. We've seen, that's one of the other, I think a lot of us thought Virgil Goode, Gary Johnson would get more than 1% in a lot of these places, and it's pretty clear tonight, as you see the numbers come in, that other candidates have barely cracked 1%.
It's amazing. Well, Chuck, Todd, thank you very much.
Rachel, the history that could be made, and it's yet to be made tonight with the full count coming in, and people are still probably voting somewhere. He could be the only president, Democratic president, since the Civil War, besides FDR, to get two elections, get two elections with 50%. A president who's had this hard fight to hold the position of president, even to keep his legitimacy in the eyes of the right, to end up being the first Democrat, the only other one besides FDR, to get 50% wins.
I just want to raise one point that Chuck just touched on there, which is that we have seen something sort of different happen on the right, and it's one of these things that there isn't a mirror image on the left, and maybe there was historically, but it's not happening at the same time right now, and that is the right questioning what used to be basic agreed upon data. You get like the bipartisan tax policy center, which really is totally, ultimately bipartisan, assessing Mitt Romney's tax plan, and the response from the Romney campaign is to attack the tax policy center as if they're a bunch of communists. You get the Congressional Research Service, which is frankly the gold standard in terms of utterly nonpartisan research for for members of Congress, reporting on the essentially economic theory of giving tax cuts to rich people and whether that leads to economic growth. That report comes out, and the Senate Republicans say they want that report rescinded. They don't like that report because they don't like what it says. The unemployment rate drops below 8%, and people on the right decide that the unemployment rate isn't below 8%. Obviously, the Bureau of Labor Statistics must be full of a bunch of communists and conspiracists who are skewing this number, and it's not the real number in America. You saw it with the polling, when the polling started very clearly showing President Obama not just winning nationally, but President Obama winning in all of the swing states that were going to put together the kind of victory that you saw tonight. They decided that they were going to reinvent their own electorate with their own polls. They were going to unskew the polls because those polls weren't real. They didn't like the answer, and so they questioned the very idea that you could have a fact on any of those issues. And that's hilarious, frankly, when you're reporting on this in a day-to-day way in the news cycle. But when it comes down to I do not believe the election, I do not believe that there is a democracy. I do not believe that states vote for presidents in a way that is observable and true and checkable, and we all follow that, even when we don't like the answer. That is something bigger than a problem with an individual news cycle, and that is a problem on the right that I think goes beyond any sort of questioning of Ohio 2004 with the Democrats or Florida 2000 with the Democrats and the way those races went. Yeah, it's worth looking at close races, and I do not begrudge the Romney campaign for saying that they've got issues with what's gone on in Ohio, but to decide that a result isn't a result as long as you don't like the outcome is something that means that we cannot work together as a country anymore, and we can't go down this road very much further.
They also believe we're going to need real leadership.
Yeah, that's right.
Because you've got to remember, we've heard in the Democratic Party that Romney's son owned the polls in Ohio and that, we couldn't get by with all of the voter restrictions. President Obama and others led and said, we're not going there, we're going to go ahead. We felt a lot of the voter stuff was unfair. People like Bishop Curry said, we're going to turn into lemonade. The Republicans have an opportunity now for mature, stable leaders to step forward and say, enough of this. The birth of stuff, the election that happened, we have got to deal with the demographics and the policies of this party. And if they don't develop mature leaders to step forward now, they will marginalize their party for a long time to come.
Well, I think that the people that voted for President Obama tonight are not expecting him to go down Pennsylvania Avenue and make sure that Mitch McConnell's the nicest guy on the block. I think this is a power move tonight. I really do. I think that this is an opportunity for the president to say we're going to move forward, and it's your fault if we don't move forward. Right. And I have got olive branches just growing out of the White House my first 4 years, but now we got to do something. And they want him to come out and protect women's rights. They want him to come out and protect workers' rights and be aggressive about it. And don't go into this lame duck session of the Congress saying, yeah, I've got Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid on the table. No, he must demand that the wealthiest Americans pay more. That's what this vote was about tonight. Income inequality. We saw it in some of our exit polling tonight. This scores very big with the American people. So I think this is a chance for the Democrats, the Senate Democrats, to keep the president very focused, not to get too far out of line and saying, oh, we got to go negotiate with the Republicans all that. Republicans need to make the move. Republicans need to step up and be the adults in the room this time around.
Republicans aren't even acknowledging that the election is over.
Exactly. That's the dynamic of it.
But we have been through this before in Ohio. John Kerry didn't concede until 10 a.m. The next morning based on Ohio. And by the way, he had a very, very strong case for moving into Ohio legally and chose not to do it because it would have followed exactly 4 years on Al Gore's use of the legal process in the election and George Bush's use of the process. And Karl Rove's been through this before. In Bush's re-election, they were crying on Air Force One. They believed that day they had lost this. Condoleezza Rice was crying. They thought it was completely over, and Karl Rove stuck with the numbers and kept studying it and kept studying Ohio and said, okay, wait, this is where I think this is. And so, look, you're absolutely right about Karl Rove being the single biggest money player in this election, which is a very strange thing that same person is analyzing this stuff this way on TV. But he has an experience here that if we were to take him at his word, it is not unreasonable for him to be doing this kind of final accounting on the Ohio vote.
As we look forward toward what's about to happen, obviously, we're still waiting for results from a lot of states where it is still too close to call. We do not have results yet in Florida. We do not have results yet in Virginia, although we got some updates there on how those states are trending. As the next bits of data come in on this, Steve Schmidt, what are you going to be looking for in terms of the Romney campaign specifically? Who's going to speak for the Republican Party on this issue?
On the issue of
Ohio and on the issue of whether this race is over?
I think it's to the point that Lawrence said. It is not unreasonable to give the Romney campaign time. Those numbers in Ohio were very, very close, and all the vote is not yet in. And if you look at 2004, John Kerry conceding the next morning, and in the Bush campaign at headquarters that night, we knew it was important to give them space. And I am sure the Obama campaign is doing exactly that now. They need to give them a little bit of time. We had the experience, obviously, in 2000 with blown calls on the network, with Al Gore having to take the concession speech back. So time to process this isn't going to kill anyone. The Republic will endure and survive for an hour or two. The issue, though, we should separate the Donald Trump issue and other people like that from this. Now, people calling for revolution and these extreme statements. When I talk about a civil war in the Republican Party, what I mean is it's time for Republican elected leaders to stand up and to repudiate this nonsense and to repudiate it directly. There has been a culture of fear and intimidation that you are not a real conservative if you stand up to these extreme statements, whether it's Rush Limbaugh calling that young lady a slut, or 100 other examples over the last 4 years. And beginning tomorrow, for the purposes of rebuilding a Republican Party, a strong Republican Party, this stuff should start being repudiated by responsible leaders.
In terms of the factual case for why Ohio has been called, what we know is that as of just before midnight, right now it's about 3 minutes after midnight, there were 750,000 votes still out in strong and moderate Democratic areas of Ohio. Obama's winning at least 60% of the votes in those areas, and again, 750,000 votes out in those areas. In the mostly Republican areas of the state, there were less than 200,000 votes out. That isn't close.
And the Republican Secretary of State all but said, it's over. I can't say it's over, but I'm going home because I don't see what there is to hang around for here tonight. and we know how biased that guy is. So the evidence that we see in front of us and that we know how to process says reasonably that this is a callable state. But, I'm not going to begrudge a campaign being reluctant to accept these calls for some period of time. There's some spot on the clock where I'm going to say, okay, this is unreasonable. this is, cut it out. Let's get this done.
We're still wondering what Mitt Romney is going to say when they get to that point, too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we heard the sort of the confident statement that there's no concession speech being planned, saying that at the beginning of the night. In terms of what's happening with Romney headquarters and what we're told to expect, we're told that Mr. Romney could speak in as soon as 15 minutes. It could be an hour. The pool had been expecting him. The pool reporters had been expecting him by now, but they have pushed it back.
I don't think there's any reason to suspect that Mitt Romney would ever be as big a man as John Kerry was in a situation like this and look at something that might be legally contestable or contestable in some way and say, no, I'm going to let the result stand and not get in there and try to tamper with it. I mean, I think this team, Romney, will fight legally and in any way they can, any result here tonight that could possibly tip it their way.
Rich guys don't like being told they can't have something.
He's had an army of lawyers at his beck and call.
Nobody likes being told they can't have something that they want.
Rich guys don't like being told that they can't have something they want.
But they bought.
Yeah, that's right.
They bought and paid for.
Ultimately, it should. I mean, I think we've made this clear, but we should also reiterate that even if, let's say, Ohio just stops coming in and it's going to be a long wait in terms of a total vote in Ohio, or even if there is a total vote in Ohio and the Romney campaign still refuses to accept it, we eventually are going to also get response. We are going to get results in Virginia and in Florida and in Nevada and in Colorado, which may render this whole conversation moot, or which may render this conversation vastly more interesting than it is already. At this point, there's no real map for how this happens thus far. The states that are remaining in terms of having a call, Alaska, we don't have a call because Alaska polls are still open, but in the other states that you see there, Nevada, Colorado, Florida, and Virginia, we are still waiting. And we're still waiting for a characterization.
The one good thing is that we've been urging people to stay in line all night. And the fact that this remains somewhat open to the results of an adequate concession speech, maybe people should stay in line now.
Well, don't you think people left line in Florida and Virginia once they heard that President Obama won?
I'd like to believe they'll stay in line long enough to win the popular vote as well as the electoral vote. Yeah. That would be a smart move.
I would not be surprised if people left those lines.
I know, but they should stay in line and try to
Florida and Virginia. We should have said that before we said Obama won. Stay in line anyway. By the way, President Obama won.
Karl Rove. We agree with Karl Rove. Stay in line.
Stay in line and be part of history, casting your vote for this winner.
Right now, the electoral vote tally, according to NBC News projections of the various states, is 274 for Barack Obama, 203 for Mitt Romney. The popular vote is as close as you see it there, 49-49, with only a couple of 100,000 votes between these two candidates. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be back again. We're expecting comments from Mitt Romney at some point this night. It had been pushed back after having been expected imminently. Now with the Romney campaign refusing to concede Ohio, we don't know when it's going to happen. We'll keep you posted. We'll be right back.
What happened to John McCain?